In the sweltering heat of Australia's top end, appearances can be deceiving. Darwin is a city of transient souls and fresh starts. A tropical frontier, where a person's history often evaporates in the humidity. Among the locals, Peter Wellman James was a success storia, muscular, tattooed entrepreneur, who seemed to have his hands in everything. To the morning commuters, he was the face behind the popular Nook Café in Palmerston, a trendy spot celebrated for its specialty coffee and vegan brunch options. Politicians, realtors, and food bloggers frequented his tables, shaking his hand and praising his business acumen. To others, he was a hard-working landscaper and the owner of a legitimate ATM service provider. But as the sun set over the Arafura Sea, the cafe owner dissolved, and a different figure emerged from the shadows. Unknown to the patrons sipping their morning brew, Peter was allegedly the architect of one of the Northern Territory's most sophisticated illicit distribution networks. While he was managing invoices for landscaping, he was simultaneously orchestrating the movement of over 1.5 tons of premium cannabis into the region. The sheer scale of the operation was difficult to comprehend. Authorities would later value the total contraband at a staggering 17 to 20 million. This wasn't a street-level hustle. It was a corporate-grade logistics empire, hidden in plain sight. The brilliance of the operation lay in its audacity. From late 2019, Peter established a complex supply chain, stretching all the way south to Adelaide. But how does one move truckloads of illicit cargo across thousands of kilometers of desert highway without attracting attention? Peter's solution was morbidly creative. The shipments arrived disguised as heavy, industrial drums, purportedly containing gravestones. These solemn monuments to the deceased provided the perfect cover, discouraging curiosity and allowing the syndicate to transport massive quantities of product right under the noses of border enforcement. Behind this logistics miracle sat a shadowy group of suppliers, known only as the Russians, often communicated with through a mysterious contact using the handle milkmen. This wasn't a casual arrangement. It was a high-stakes partnership that generated wealth most people only dream of. Peter was moving enough product to generate nearly $1 million a week. The financial logistics were just as intense as the physical smuggling. On a near-weekly basis, Peter would package up to $800,000 in cold hard cash. To ensure the bills remained compact and undetectable, the money was vacuum-sealed in cryovac bags, treating currency like perishable food, before being shipped back to the suppliers in Adelaide. For nearly a year, the system worked flawlessly. The gravestones came north, and the cryovac cash went south. Peter walked the streets of Darwin as a respected pillar of the community, a man who supported local libraries and served paleo breakfasts. Yet, beneath the surface of this legitimate businessman was a high-level operator, managing a volatile, multi-million-dollar account with an international crime syndicate. But as with all empires built on secrets, the cracks were already beginning to form, not from the outside, but from the very mechanism Peter used to clean his dirty money. The most dangerous aspect of running a shadow economy isn't necessarily acquiring the illicit product. It is managing the mountains of physical currency that come with it. Cash is heavy, it smells, and in large volumes it raises immediate red flags with banking authorities. Peter, however, had devised a solution that was as brilliant as it was brazen. He didn't just hide his money. He invited the public to wash it for him. Peter owned and operated a franchise known as ATM Darwin, a fleet of private cash machines scattered throughout the territory. To the casual observer, these were simply convenient kiosks for withdrawing petty cash at festivals or markets. In reality, they were the engine room of a massive laundering operation. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Peter would take the crumpled illicit banknotes generated from street sales money that was dirty in every sense of the word and physically load them into his own ATM canisters. When unsuspecting customers withdrew $20 or $50 to buy a coffee or a souvenir, they were unwittingly acting as mules, carrying away the physical evidence of the crime. The brilliance of the loop was in the electronic settlement. Once a customer withdrew the cash, the interbank network would electronically reimburse Peter's business account with clean, legitimate funds. It bypassed the scrutiny of bank tellers and anti-money laundering algorithms entirely. The cash that had started its journey in a dark alley ended up sparkling clean in a corporate ledger, indistinguishable from genuine business profits. This allowed Peter to move through Darwin with bags of banknotes without raising suspicion. After all, servicing ATMs requires transporting cash. This financial wizardry supported a lavish lifestyle that further cemented his image as a successful entrepreneur. Peter resided in a sprawling 1 million home in Bellarmac, a property that would later become a focal point for investigators. But unlike a typical suburban residence, this house was fortified like a command center. Paranoia had begun to set in. Peter had installed an extensive, military-grade security system, turning his home into a fortress. He would later attempt to explain this to a medical professional as the result of delusional anxiety about intruders, but the courts would eventually see a more pragmatic reason. He was guarding a bank vault. Inside the residence, the trappings of a high-stakes thriller were part of daily life. Peter and his inner circle didn't communicate on standard networks. They utilized encrypted Cipher phones, devices costing $6,000 each, designed to be impenetrable to police interception. These devices allowed for the remote deletion of messages, a digital burn bag for their secrets. The organization was compartmentalized and disciplined. Peter operated under the handle Hippie. His trusted lieutenant, Jeremy James Ford, went by Stealthy, while his cousin, Michael Laundering, used the codename Zephyr. They were a tight-knit unit, insulated by technology and layers of deception. But even the best encryption cannot hide physical reality. Behind the reinforced doors of his Bellarmac home, Peter was hoarding immense wealth. Hidden in the walk-in robe of his master bedroom were packages containing over $200,000 in cash. Another $100,000 was stashed elsewhere in the house, alongside a black Kevlar ballistic vest, a stark reminder that despite the corporate veneer, the threat of violence was never far away. The digital fortress was strong, but the human element was about to falter. The most formidable walls can keep intruders out, but they cannot stop the rot from within. By mid-2020, the seamless operation Peter had built began to show signs of internal decay. While the encryption was state-of-the-art, the human relationships managing it were fraying under the immense pressure of the illicit trade. Shannon Wagner, Peter's trusted second-in-command for the Darwin sector, was becoming increasingly disillusioned with his boss leadership. Wagner was the logistical engine, handling the day-to-day distribution and coordinating with the southern supply chain. But in the shadows, he was already plotting a coup. Unknown to the syndicate, detectives were already listening. In covertly recorded conversations, the frustration in Wagner's voice was palpable. He confided in his wife that Peter lacked the organizational discipline required for such high-stakes commerce. The situation was deteriorating. Wagner noted that they're ripping him off again, and that financial flow had stalled. The Russians, the silent partners in Adelaide, were growing impatient. The count wasn't right, the money was fed up, and confidence in Peter Hippie was plummeting. The suppliers were not forgiving entities, and they began orchestrating a leadership change, communicating directly with Wagner and effectively sidelining Peter from his own empire. The tension reached a breaking point in September 2020, when the operation suffered a catastrophic blow. Police intercepted a massive shipment of over 80 kilograms of cannabis, destined for the Darwin market. The seizure was devastating. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential revenue vanished into an evidence locker. The supply chain disruption sent shockwaves through the local market, driving street prices up to $6,500 per pound. But for Peter, the cost was far higher. He still owed the suppliers for the lost product. Desperation set in. The calm, collected businessman vanished, replaced by a frantic operator scrambling to mitigate the damage. Peter made an urgent call to his cousin and close associate, Michael Laundering Zephyr, instructing him to immediately retrieve any remaining stock from a storage shed in Killarney. It was a move born of panic, a frantic attempt to salvage liquid assets before the walls closed in. But it was too late. The surveillance team watching the syndicate had seen enough. On November 4, 2020, the illusion finally shattered. Tactical teams descended on Peter's Bellarmac fortress in a synchronized dawn raid. The element of surprise was absolute. Inside, they found the physical proof of the double life, the substantial cash reserves stuffed in the wardrobe, the ballistic body armor, and the encrypted devices that had failed to protect them. Simultaneously, raids were conducted across the network. At the residence of Jeremy Ford Stealthy, police discovered another $230,000 in cash and illicit substances, hidden in a medicine cabinet. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence wasn't the drugs or the money, but the hubris, captured on video. Recovered footage from Peter's own high-definition security cameras installed to protect his empire became the prosecution's star witness. The jury would later see Peter sitting casually by his pool, methodically counting stacks of cash before packing them to be freighted south. The technology he used to feel safe had ultimately provided the clearest window into his crimes. The King of the North had fallen, but as investigators sifted through the wreckage, they realized this case exposed a vulnerability far greater than just one man's greed. When the gavel finally fell, the courtroom was left to grapple with two very different versions of Peter Wellman James. The prosecution painted a picture of a calculating mastermind who had flooded the territory with illicit substances for pure profit. However, the defense presented a man shattered by grief. Evidence emerged that since 2012, Peter had been a dedicated patron of an orphanage in Indonesia, funding water projects and schools. His lawyers argued that his descent into the underworld was triggered by a heart-wrenching tragedy, the loss of 2 young lives under his carry-on to a drowning accident and another to illness. They claimed his criminal associations began as a way to manage a spiral of self-inflicted guilt and sudden, overwhelming debt to unforgiving lenders. Justice Peter Barr, however, looked at the cold, hard facts. He found the explanation for the military-grade security. System Peter's claim of delusional beliefs to be unconvincing. The cameras and the fortified doors weren't for peace of mind. They were to protect a cash stockpile that rivaled small banks. The judge sentenced Peter to 12 years behind bars, with a non-parole period of 5 years. As Peter sat in the dock, shaking his head, the reality of his double life collapsing around him was final. His associates, Shannon Wagner and Corey Graham, received similarly lengthy sentences, effectively dismantling the Darwin cell of the syndicate. But as the prison doors closed on Peter, a much larger, more disturbing story began to unravel that implicated the financial infrastructure of the country itself. The investigation revealed that the ATM company, ATM Go, which had supplied Peter's machines despite his previous criminal record, was operating in a regulatory blind spot. This wasn't an isolated oversight. Investigators discovered that the same company had installed machines in numerous shops across Queensland's east coast that were fronts for the illicit tobacco trade. These establishments, often the sites of intense rivalries and targeted attacks, were cash-only businesses. In one particularly chaotic incident at Browns Plains, a shop was engulfed in flames, leaving 2 individuals with severe injuries. When police arrived to inspect the charred remains, they found a grim symbol of the industry's resilience. Amidst the smoking debris, an ATM Go sign remained standing, its arrow still pointing toward the ruin. It was a perfect metaphor for the situation. The business of moving money continued, regardless of the destruction around it. Financial crime experts were alarmed. The system allowed operators to take dirty street cash, load it into machines and have it returned to them as legitimate digital settlements. It was a laundering loop that bypassed the standard questions asked by banks. While government ministers acknowledged the growing concern and promised tighter regulations, the damage was done. The case exposed how easily the lines between legitimate commerce and organized crime could be blurred. Today, Peter waits for his potential release in 2027. His empire of cafes and landscaping trucks dismantled or sold off. Yet, the story remains unfinished. The mysterious Russians, the shadowy suppliers in Adelaide, known only by code names, were never apprehended. They remain out there, ghosts in the system, likely finding new avenues and new operators to move their product. The Darwin operation was stopped, but the network that fed it, and the financial loopholes that enabled it, are still very much alive.